This is going to be the top 10 reasons why a game is good to speedrun. Now, a strong reason why I've made this video after over a year of speedrunning games is that I've come to understand that myself and many others and other runners have come to be stonewalled by certain games that don't meet, certain parameters or expectations as far as speedrunning goes. In no particular order, the first thing that I'm going to cover is pace. Can you control it, or does it control you? So what is pace exactly as far as speedrunning goes, and well, even casually? Pace in a game is how fast or slow you can progress through it. So what would be the number one thing that somebody wouldn't like when speedrunning a game as far as pace goes? They're constantly interrupted by something, and I mean constantly, or maybe intermediately, but it's for very long periods of time. So do you go through maybe 20 minutes of the run and all of a sudden you run into a 2 to 5 minute cutscene, text, dialogues over and over again. This completely ruins the pace of the game, as it could have been possibly 30 minutes to even a whole hour shorter if cutscenes were removed, text was, skippable, just generally everything skippable. Now the next thing that I'm going to cover is movement. And as far as I can remember from playing games, movement has been one of the most important things when it comes to playing a game for me personally. Many others would agree. Nearly all speedrunners will agree. If the movement is bad, then the speedrun is potentially going to be bad, or at least very frustrating and not as enjoyable as it could be. So, what kind of types of movement are there in games? Well, clunky tends to get thrown around a lot. It's very jittery, it's very slow, it's not fluid. It might be very super directional. You don't have as precise movement as you could. People tend to really enjoy games that have fluid movement, that that gives you a freedom to do a lot of things that you always wish you could in potentially older games, that restricted you from maybe climbing or touching certain areas of the environment, or maybe you had a stamina bar that you didn't like, and a new game that comes out and allows you to constantly dash and create a very fast pace. Is there enough elements in the movement that makes it artistic? Do you feel like you're dancing as you're doing the run? These things are very important. So if the movement is bad, then most likely there's not going to be many people speedrunning the game. Alright, so the next thing that I'm going to cover is the flow. Now, what is the flow of a game and speedrunning? It can be a very subjective term, but I would describe flow as how well a game transitions from point to point, and you could say this casually as well. Objective to objective, mission to mission, start to finish of the game. Do you feel like you're constantly interrupted, or is there just enough transitions and breaks to where you have time to breathe? Flow is very important, because what tends to make a speedrun very enjoyable and satisfying, and what you'll see hundreds of runners participating in a game, is you start the game, there's minimal cutscenes or cutscenes that you can skip. You start moving, you hit the objective, you're good. You hit another objective, you're good. You transfer worlds, it's minimal loading times, you're already on the next aspect of the game. When you reset, you're already starting. Can you move from objective to objective? That's a big point, is that when you're resetting in the game, if the flow is bad, then the frustration will increase. But if the flow is good, it'll be very minimal, and the runner will have to reflect on how to make necessary improvements, as opposed to fixating on the just general frustration and having to sit through the cutscene. The next thing that I'm going to cover is the length of the speedrun. Now, as far as length goes, the most popular range tends to be around 30 minutes to an hour and a half. This is games that I see a lot of speedrunners engage in, and part of this has to do with how much free time they have in their personal life. There's a good handful of people that would like to do runs that are anywhere from 3 to 6 to maybe even longer than that, but they just don't personally have the time to do it. So the next thing that I'm going to cover is RNG. Now, what does RNG stand for exactly? Random number generator, but it's often also referred to as luck, as chance, as behavior, as spawns. And RNG can be very volatile, depending on what game you're playing, because if you are trying to become very skillful at the game and master different routes, different paths, sometimes you might get a bump that happens in a run, and like literally you might just get bumped off to the side and it just completely changes to RNG just in a flash. Just psh, all of a sudden the enemy and everything around you is not acting the way that you're used to or the way that you want it to, so then you have to adapt. So that's one aspect of RNG, but the main thing that tends to be a run killer is when things are just left up to complete chance. So it's maybe a 10% chance that you get this amount of enemies in the room and with this amount of item spawns, and they all respond with whatever behavior, and this 10% is what you need to save X amount of seconds to minutes in the run so that you can either hold or obtain a world record. And a classic example of RNG that just can dictate whether a run is good or bad is in Ocarina of Time. There's an NPC called Dampe, and you have a very small percentage chance that when you talk to him and you pay the amount of rupees that you dig up a heart piece. And because this is a 100% run and you have to collect everything, you can't skip it. So you can have just a completely beautiful run, and then all of a sudden you're 6 minutes in the red because the bastard just wouldn't give you the damn heart piece. So the next thing to talk about is how well the game lets you skip dialogue, text, and cutscenes, as this can just be the absolute bane of a certain game in the speedrunning aspect. Nobody wants to go through a game and sit through about an hour of dialogue, text, and cutscenes put together. Nobody wants to reset and have to sit through that all over again. So it's very important that game developers just insert the ability to skip all of that, because you'll watch it the first time because it's the first time. It's it's enjoyable, you're seeing something new, something that you can get into. But if you're playing the game over again on maybe a higher difficulty, or you die to a boss, it just becomes absolute frustration at that point, having to waste your time sitting through something that you just really wish that you could skip. So next thing I'm going to talk about is glitches, exploits, and skips, and how this can be a deal breaker for many people in the community and runners in the community. And it's that some games just won't be enjoyable for them unless they can find a way to massively break it. And I've talked to people about this, and they have told me before that unless they're playing the game with a trainer, or they find some type of glitch, exploit, or skip that just makes the game considerably faster, or just fun to play, fun to watch, that they won't run the game. And this can be a cause of the game lacking these 10 aspects that I'm talking about. It could be bad game development, a frustrating aspect of the game, RNG, just there's a lot of different factors. But for these people, if they can't break the game, they will not run it. So it's an important speedrunning aspect to mention. So this next thing I'm going to talk about is not something that should be taken lightly, as it can be the single-handed most important factor of whether someone will speedrun a game or not, and that is the skill improvement or the skill cap of the game. So people will like a challenge, and if the game offers no challenge, this can either deter people from running the game, or they'll find the challenge in beating the game as fast as possible, and every half a second to even down to the last frame will matter significantly. And you'll be hovering in and out of red splits, maybe being behind a few seconds here, or just barely be in the green by 1 second or half a second, whatever the case may be. Skill improvement and skill cap is one of the most gratifying things that I would say myself and other runners would say speedrunning rewards them with, and it's that you start on a game, whether casually or the first run, and it's just absolutely terrible. First runs tend to be terrible. You forget where to go, you don't do things as optimally, and you might die or fail to do things just plenty of times to where it's just a terrible run. But then you get on that next run and suddenly you save maybe like 10 to 20 minutes because you don't mess up as much or you don't die, and you're starting to grasp how to maneuver through the game, as fast as what speedrunning dictates. And by that third and fourth run, you're starting to have things on, pretty good pace. You're going pretty fast, and this is where you're starting to have everything a lot more memorized, and things are starting to sync up. But it's beyond these runs that really can both generate frustration but also provide a lot of satisfaction when you start to get personal bests or even achieve a world record. And it's that you have acquired so much skill in the game, or even just general genre. So maybe like the FPS or role-playing or action-adventure, open world, whatever it may be. You've acquired so much skill in running the game or this type of genre that during this run, everything lines up and you just get a crazy personal best or record. And it's just so satisfying because maybe you've run the game 5 to 10 times, maybe you run it 1,000 times. Depending on what game and how popular the community is, or even if you're just by yourself, when you achieve that run that you wanted, that gets a really good time, at least in your eyes, it's very rewarding because it took a lot of skill and improvement upon your part, and it's just one of the most gratifying things. And you could even say that this is one of the most gratifying things in life, and that speedrunning emulates this very well. So this is definitely an important thing to mention as far as what makes a game good to speedrun.
Done.
We did it. We saved time as well.
Dude, yeah. Oh shit. Well, real time doesn't matter.
We did it. It paid off and we did it. All kills are done.
GG.
Oh, GG, Pog Champ. My God.
So another thing that I'm going to talk about that's not as widely discussed among both casual and speedrunning communities, but I find to be really, really satisfying when a game does it right, is menuing. And how you could do 50 to 100 inputs that would normally take somebody maybe 30 seconds to do, and you as a speedrunner do it in like 3 seconds. It's absolutely just crazy to watch. It's really fun to do, and it's really satisfying when you execute it right. And it's just little details like this that help boost the flow and the pace of the game just significantly, because it's just one more assured aspect of the game that lets you showcase your skill and execution and adds to the amount of gratification you get when you successfully do something in the best way possible. Now this last thing is what tends to make or break a person's decision from playing a game altogether, let alone speedrunning it. And it's whether or not a game has a good X factor. An X factor is something that makes the game uniquely good, hilariously bad, something that maybe brings out nostalgia, something that is just so challenging that even finishing the game or this mission or aspect or whatever it may be is very satisfying and impressive and great to look back on. It's something that just crosses the bridge between being satisfied or liking a game to absolutely loving it and adding it to your top 5 or top 10 or whatever the list may be. What makes the game unique?